Welcome to UGC E-Pathshala. The module we are going to discuss today is Sociological Theory of Rights. What are the learning outcomes of this module? Sociology as a branch of knowledge had been evolved based on the scientific method as applied in the study of pure sciences. This module helps students find out the origin and formation of human rights and are well defined and reformulated along with research in the field of sociology. By the end of the module, students will come to know theorizing human rights in a sociological perspective. It's a vast subject, and that the scope of the subject is wide and very relevant for our understanding and expansion of human rights. So, introduction to sociology and rights. Sociology is a branch of knowledge. It studies societies. Man or woman, since his or her life in primitive times, has not been alone, has lived in a family, in a group. We may call a society is not that where in a place lives only one individual. For formation of at least two or more persons are required. Thus, family too is a society, a primary society. Sociology aims at study of societies in a scientific, logical and rational way. When we use the term science, one has to apply this word to modern science that was supported by sense perception, experimental verification and inference. Until 18th century, study of society was not given a scientific approach. In fact, all branches also aimed at knowing about the ultimate reality, and with curiosity of creation and with many questions on life after death, etc. All branches of life, of knowledge, like that we individually treat as botany, zoology, physics, medicine, astronomy, were treated as part of philosophy. It was only after inventions in science and technology, inventions of laws of electricity, dynamics, gravitation, and heliocentric theories, and many scientific inventions that developed human lives, industrially and technologically. Philosophers hitherto believed in certain eternal laws to guide the world supernaturally, followed deductive logic, the method of arriving at truth from universals to particulars. Philosophers like Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato and Aristotle and others too in the ancient times studied and theorized about man and society, but it systemized only in the modern times with the influence of scientific developments. Francis Bacon's theory on inductive method of logic and scientific reasoning made certain philosophers too to follow science and inductive method of logic. In this context, in support of theories on universals that philosophers believe, that's to say that most Auguste Comte, a French philosopher, wanted to study philosophy in a scientific way. Later he studied societies in a scientific way and arrived at certain valid truths on study by experimental method. Auguste Comte was called the father of sociology. Sociology is a branch of knowledge which is a science which took a major role in the area of social science studies, human beings' interactions with each other, behaviors of people, factors that determine human social, economic and political lives. Its objectives are to find out the ways to bring good social psychology in societies meant for well-being of all. Research data connected by sociology is a good source to understand social changes and developments too. Thus, applied branches, namely political sociology, economic sociology, sociology of law, social psychology, social anthropology, rural sociology, and many other branches have taken momentum for the development of human societies. These specialized areas of sociology thus study people's economic, psychological, political behaviors and find out the reasons and methods to improve the society scientifically. Man has to live in, or man or woman has to live in his or her relation with others, cannot live in isolation, hence his or her interactions with others should lead for good social life. Research thus helps to take policy suggestion in the major area of health, education, and other social aspects mainly. It's due to development in the area of sociology only. Many of the national and international initiatives have been translated as rights of women, child, industrial workers, and many disadvantaged groups. August Comte, Herbert Spencer, Emil Durkheim, Max Weber, George Simmel, Talcott Parsons, Malinowski, and Karl Marx, Robert Merton, Herbert Mead are some major contributors in the field of sociology. There are many sociologists in recent times, namely Lévi-Strauss, Michel Foucault, Jürgen Habermas, and many others. Some of the social theories put forward by these sociologists are explained below. Major sociological theories on human rights. As discussed above, people thought of society even before sociology developed as a formal discipline. Hindu Vedas, Old Testament, Greek classics like Aristotle's Politics, Plato's Republic all might contribute to sociological thinking. Sociological theories have been developed due to social, political, economic forces in the backdrop of science and technology revolutions of 19th century. There are three major theories, namely structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. We may understand them as three major paradigms of sociology. Some sociologists propounded thought-provoking and significant theories. For example, Durkheim's studies on the reasons and rate of suicides at macro level. His research on macro level collected helped to evolve. The reasons were due to religious affiliation. Different affiliations found different rates. So thus, Durkheim found that Protestants had significantly more suicide rates than Catholic communities because Catholics had a more integrated family life. Now let's look at structural functionalism. See, society is a combination of various social groups associated in various organizations, establishments, and communities. Each group is such established association works as a whole, works for each other. Individual for his personal or her personal needs and needs of his or her beloved joins a group. In fact, family itself is a primary group of society. Structural functionalism is a theory that treats society as a whole and as a social system. Herbert Spencer, Emil Durkheim, Parsons, Alfred Radcliffe Brown, and Robert Merton are some sociologists who helped to develop this theoretical framework or model of sociology. Herbert Spencer, an English sociologist, analyzes society based on the measurement of like elements and unlike elements of society. It's the degree of integration and degree of disintegration that determines the strength and weaknesses of that particular group or society. The more the structural elements that are self-sufficient and identical, the more the strength of the society. However, structural elements can be extended as educational institutions, health institutions at larger level. Further, each institution in turn will have its own structural components to integrate or disintegrate. Emil Durkheim lived from between 1820 and 1903. A French sociologist studied society in the area of goods and services and division of labor. Population density is, for him, the determinant to cause pressure and disintegrity as we understand in a general sense. Hence, division of labor, according to Durkheim, helps in social solidarity and integration, and a moral density, according to Durkheim. Auguste Comte too stressed on the systematic character of society and on the role of social consensus. Talcott Parsons, 1902-1979, viewed society as a functionally related structure, believed that the major function of state is to provide goods and services required for survival of the system. At the same time, he identifies four major issues of social system: goal attainment, adaptation, integration, and tension management. As for instance, Laluddin contends that in a factory management, it's important to see that a good relation is maintained between employers and workers, and to safeguard their needs and security are essential functions. Alfred Radcliffe Brown 1881 to 1955, sensed the need for laws when all the members can do their functions together and also to make a society stable. For Radcliffe Brown defined function of any recurrent activity as the part it played in social life as a whole, and thereby the contribution it makes to structural continuity. Further, Robert Merton discusses three functions in his theory on structural functionalism. He understands that there are manifest functions and there are latent functions and there are dysfunctions. Well, the manifest functions are visible to us. For example, educational functions for the children's development that make him or her self-sufficient by enabling him or her a career, but in the process sometimes other activities too will be carried out by the student, extracurricular activity or an activity that is not actually related with the major function. For example, of finding a spouse in the process of education in school or college. Such function is called latent function or something which was not intended in the first place. Dysfunction, according to Merton, is visible in non-performance of educational activity, dropouts, lower grades and non-attainment of graduation, and these are the areas where the institution needs to take care for the understanding of rights for all. In society, all the members play their role. We can then extend this theory on structural functionalism to any system or group, including family, lest quest and conflict for rights are inevitable. How conflict theory takes the other side of structural, we will now understand. Conflict theory is critical of functionalism, emphasizes conflict and inequality. Lawlerdine held that conflict theory comes to us against structural functionalism, which sees society as well-integrated social system. This theory the conflict school deals with dominant social, political and economic forces. Karl Marx, Saint-Simon, Max Weber, George Simmel studied social systems in terms of conflict forces. Conflict theory basically aims not only to find the forces that are basis for social disequilibrium, but also makes use of the force of the deprived categories to wage a revolution in order to build a society with new social, political, economic and also familial values. Social change is possible while conflict is rife and makes the deprived desperate at one point and questions the society in a collective way. Whether Marx claimed himself as sociologist or not, many political theorists and sociologists and even economists consider him a sociologist. Marxism is treated as scientific socialism. To call Marx social inequality is rooted in mode of production, or the way we produce. How we produce is essentially what we understand as mode of production, and the relations that arise out of that, and accumulation of capital, money, land or anything that has a value and it makes powerful is the determinant of political power too. All individuals will be categorized into two classes according to Marx: bourgeois or the socially dominant class or the capitalist class, and proletariat class or the dependent class or the industrial working class. Any labor is not justly paid according to Marx. This leaves a surplus value which becomes the profit for the employer and a loss, unpaid labor, to the proletariat. Persistent loss makes the proletariat class weaker and weaker and the bourgeoisie or the capitalist class stronger and stronger. The conflict theory based on the social class struggle ends up when the proletariat unite, or when the industrial working class unite and wage revolution against the bourgeoisie and take social and political power. Many nations, though initially did not agree for political power gained through democracies or tyrannies, once gained will tend to be lost by any person, groups or nations. Over a period of time, the impact of Marxist thought led nations to understand the humanistic aspect of labor and tried to build welfare economies and welfare states or socialistic democracies. Max Weber too, like Marx, is a reformist and he believed in rationalization of legal systems, rules. Like Weber too saw the conflicting and competing forces in the society to cause inequality. Weber identified many other inequalities other than economic inequalities, meaning inequalities between genders, races, and other social statuses. According to Weber, understanding of political, economic, and social worlds is to be done not only through the concept of conflict, but also through using other concepts such as advantages, power, prestige, and privileges. And Weber was able to present a broader perspective of conflict theory. Hence, expansion of rights is a possible phenomenon through study of conflicts in terms of advantages and possession in a society. George Simmel recognized the significance, internal solidarity, and centralized power to reduce tension and conflict. Simmel anticipated how large-scale social structures like the money economy can dominate individuals in their work, namely the philosophy of money. However, Simmel also focused on small-scale issues like social interaction between people. Now let's look at the third school, Symbolic Interactionism, a sociological theory put forward by Charles H. Cooley, Herbert Mead, and William Isaac Thomas. It studies social phenomenon both at social and psychological levels. These sociologists were interested to know how an individual acquires personal and social characteristics, also social identity. Mead had worked further, and to him, human mind itself is a social product. Some features of symbolic interactionism are: symbolic interactionism studies human responses. People respond in a subjective way. It's futile to evaluate one's behavior in an objective way. It analyzes social relations at a micro level, meaning very small levels. It examines the role of communication as a unique phenomenon, as how through communication we create a reality, and social pattern is subject to negotiation. Social patterns are expressed in symbolic patterns. People influence each other through their actions, and it's an ongoing process. How people assign values to things do not convey intrinsic value. Meaning and values are social products. Meanings have permanent character. Their implications may differ. Look at the significance of sociological theory today. Study of sociology has a significant relevance for the study of rights. While structural functionalism can help us to appreciate the moral strength of societies and major organizations and how human rights are important for maintaining social order and integration, conflict theory, on the other hand, deals with disintegrated components and issues of society. Further, conflict theory helps us to reconstruct the society on new social and political principles at larger level. Structural functionalism helps to see society not only as social order, but as a moral order to help each other respect each other's rights. Educational institutions and religious institutions all support to help this moral and social consensus according to this theory. Studies in this area help societies to know the moral basis of rights, moral strength of institutions, and helps us to educate and rectify the declining strength of societies. For example, studies on geriatric care, and not only studies the status of aged people, but also paves the way where rights of elderly are secured. For example, Canada improved well-defined health care systems for elderly people. Conflict theory gained significance in the open debates for women's rights against exploitation, abuse, and harassment. As we understand from the conflict theories, they helped nations to revolt and to establish democracies and to protect rights of majority. Even today, nations like Myanmar, Siberia are struggling to establish democracies. Not only in the third world nations, we find discrimination in distribution of rights. In the developed nations, economically developed nations, quest for rights of women and colored people and rights of migrants are not satisfactory. This theory also is relevant in the branch of social psychology to resolve conflicts in an amicable way too. Some of the peace theories of Gandhi, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Dalai Lama, and ecumenical perspectives aim to resolve conflicts in a non-violent way. For example, Gene Sharp, a sociologist of our times and also the one who was influenced by Gandhi, founded the Albert Einstein Institute in 1983 to establish democracy non-violently. through his works like Waging Nonviolent Struggles, 20th Century Potential, and From Dictatorship to Democracy, a Conceptual for Liberation. These are some of his key works that have contributed to nonviolent social movements or furthered our understanding of nonviolent tactics. Let's conclude. Summary: theory and structural functionalism impacts integrity and solidarity. Conflict theory helps us to understand social change through negotiation or sometimes through revolution, and symbolic interaction might help us to understand perspectives at individual level and help qualitative studies in society. No theory is comprehensive. We have to look each theory in its specialized way as well as in its relation with other aspects. And we also understand that the scope for sociological theory is vast. Particularly, to sum up, conflict theory lays emphasis on understanding societies in terms of their social inequalities, to put a spotlight on social inequalities, and to work towards a more humane, egalitarian social order. So, sociological theory, particularly conflict theory, has helped us to become more aware of rights that had been hitherto ignored in sociology. And for example, feminist theory is a variant of conflict theory that has made us sensitive towards questions of gender stratification and has helped in furthering the cause of women's rights. Thank you very much.